When the Seattle Seahawks won Super Bowl 48 over the Denver Broncos, it wasn't hard to see why many saw this team as the next great dynasty in the NFL. And it wasn't just because this team won the Super Bowl, but it's how they did it. In case you don't remember, the 2013 Denver Broncos were the highest scoring offense of all time, a record that still stands today, and the Seahawks beat them by 35 points. How'd they do it? With a young Russell Wilson, a fired-up Percy Harvin, and most importantly, with the Legion of Boom. Led by Hall of Fame talents like Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor, the Legion of Boom brought Peyton Manning's Denver Broncos to their knees and just 1 year later would have the chance to do the same thing to none other than Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. And if you're watching this video, I don't need to remind you how that went for the Seahawks, and I also don't need to remind you that this would be the last time this team would ever play for a Super Bowl. Which leads me to the point of today's video. We're calling it a dynasty do-over because that's exactly what it is. A chance for Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, and the Legion of Boom to rewrite the history books and cement the Seattle Seahawks of the 2010s as the great dynasty they could have been. Now this is part one of what I anticipate to be a multi-year series. I'm thinking at least 5 years or so, depending on how things go for us, but we're starting things now in the 2015 offseason. And it was a busy offseason for Seattle. As you can see, pretty decent list of players they signed or re-signed, Marshawn Lynch being the main one to notice there. A couple losses, the main one was Byron Maxwell, member of that Seahawks secondary. He left for the Eagles, and the big move that this team made this offseason was the trade for Jimmy Graham. They sent Max Unger and a first-round pick, 31st overall in the 2015 NFL Draft, to the Saints for Jimmy Graham and a fourth. Next, I want to take a look at the 2015 draft class, and all in all, for not having a first-round pick, this was a pretty solid draft class for Seattle. Frank Clark and Tyler Lockett both becoming long-term starters. Tyler Lockett in particular, amazing pick by Seattle, still a great receiver to this day. Mark Glowinski actually ended up being pretty solid with the Colts. I don't think he ever did a whole lot in Seattle. I believe he is a New York Giant now, so overall, not a bad draft class whatsoever. And of course, we are going to be rewriting the history books a little bit here, but I feel it's relevant to explore and see exactly how the season went in real life for Seattle. So they were pretty good this year. They went 10-6, and you have to consider the fact that it was a 2-4 start. They went 8-2 down the stretch, so things really heated up for them. They got the 6th seed. This was the year that the Cardinals were really good with Carson Palmer. They were the winners of the NFC West, so they did enter the playoffs as a wild card team. They actually had the number 4 offense and the number 2 defense in the NFL, and you can see some of the player stats there. This was a bit of a breakout year for Russell Wilson, I believe. I mean, I think this was his best season to date. Over 4,000 yards, 34 touchdowns to only 8 interceptions. Also worth noting is the fact that Marshawn Lynch was pretty banged up this season, limited to just 7 games. Wikipedia says he only got 6 starts, so Thomas Rawls was the leading rusher for this team. Also worth noting is that Tyler Lockett, despite only getting 8 starts as a rookie, put up very solid numbers, 664 yards and 8 receiving scores. Not bad at all for the third-round rookie. And now let's talk about the playoffs, and they were entertaining for Seattle this year. If you don't remember, in the wild card round, they played the Minnesota Vikings. It was a freezing cold game, super low scoring, and as you can see here, the Vikings had a chance to win, down by 1 with 26 seconds left. All that Blair Walsh has to do is hit a 27-yard field goal, and Vikings fans, I'm so sorry if you're watching this, but he shanked it. So they got the lucky win there on the road, and they got to move on to face Cam Newton and the insane Carolina Panthers. This was Cam's MVP season, and they did lose the game 31-24. I actually did see they trailed 31-0 at half. Now, I don't know if they got like a late score in the last couple minutes. I don't know if this game was as close as it looked, but man, imagine blowing a 31-0 lead in the playoffs if you're Cam Newton and the Panthers. Just an interesting note. So things ended for the Seahawks in the divisional round after going to the Super Bowl the last 2 seasons. And now it's time for the fun part. So before we hop into Madden and actually look at our changes and get started with the season, let's discuss some of the changes that I'm going to be making. Now, honestly, some of these moves, they were decent, I guess, in the short term, especially from a Madden standpoint. Jimmy Graham would do great things for us, but I actually am going to undo that trade because I want that first round pick back, and I also want Max Unger. He actually went on to play a solid few more seasons for the Saints. I don't know if he was great with them, but he's certainly better than what we have right now. So I think that is a decent move for us. And to get ourselves a legit receiving threat in the tight end game, you know what I mean, we are going to sign Charles Clay. He actually signed with the Buffalo Bills for this exact offer, 5 years, $38 million. I did see it was something to where he had played for the Dolphins. He gave them a chance to match. They wouldn't do it. I'd have to imagine Charles Clay would be thrilled to come play with the Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll. I think this is a good deal for us. We do have the cap space to do it. I did verify that. Now for the draft, here's what I'm going to do in each video. I am going to allow myself to change 2 draft picks. So we're keeping things as realistic as possible. I've set a couple rules for myself. If I take a guy, it can't be somebody that's taken rounds later. For example, in this draft, I cannot say with the 31st overall pick, we're going to take Stephon Diggs, who was a 5th round pick. That is not something that I'm going to do. We are going to take Ali Marpet 31st overall. He was a 2nd round pick in real life, and unless I'm mistaken, this is actually a player the Buccaneers traded in front of the Seahawks because they knew that the Seahawks wanted him in the 2nd round. So this is somebody Seattle was looking at. He obviously has played up to being a 1st round talent, up until his retirement, of course, but just an incredible guard. I think that's a great pick for us. And in the 4th round, I believe it's the 4th round, forgive me, 130th overall, we are going to be drafting Jay Ajayi because, as you could see, we've got the full benefit of hindsight. That Marshawn Lynch injury was not great for Seattle. Thomas Rawls, he was fine, but Jay Ajayi, even in lieu of his injury history, he was a great talent. He was really fun to watch when he was on the field. He was great with the Dolphins for a short stretch there. So I think taking the risk on him, a little bit of a flyer here at 130 is not bad. These are the moves. Now let's hop into Madden 16 to take a look at the 2015 Seattle Seahawks. Alright, bring on the nostalgia. There's Odell Beckham, your Madden 16 cover athlete, hitting the whip, hitting that one-handed catch that this game is pretty widely known for. Every single receiver has this animation in the game for some reason. You got 5'9" T.Y. Hilton out here mossing dudes. But enough of that, let's get into the rebuild. And now we're in the 2015 preseason. To start things off, here is your opening roster. You will notice some of these players' ratings might look a little bit inflated. For example, I don't think Charles Clay ever played at a level to where he would have been deserving of a 90 overall. No disrespect to Charles Clay, that's just a very high rating, but the thing is, other teams' ratings are inflated as well, so I'm not going to let this bother me too much. In this Madden, you actually can't adjust the players' ratings. I'm going with the official EA roster. So if anything looks off, I apologize, but we're really doing the best that we can here with what is ultimately not a great game. But anyways, you've got Russell Wilson at a 94 overall. Marshawn Lynch is a 96. That's crazy. Receiving core is actually pretty solid. Doug Baldwin's an 87. Jermaine Curse is an 83. And Tyler Lockett, the rookie, is a 76. Now the offensive line. So the 2 changes that we've made are going to provide what I feel is a great boost to this O-line off the bat. Anyone who remembers Russell Wilson's career as a Seahawk, this guy would run for his life almost every single game. I feel like up until that last year or so when the line finally started to improve a little bit. Let me know if I'm wrong. Obviously, I'm a Colts fan. I did not get the chance to catch many Seahawks games. They were on primetime quite a bit, of course, with the success that they had, but the Seahawks O-line was always, I feel, a pretty big weakness during Russell Wilson's career there. So we now have Max Unger back, and we have Ali Marpet, so I think that we're in a good position there. Russell Okung is also solid, and then the right side is a little bit weak with Sweezy and Bailey, but I definitely still think it is fine. Now let's head over to the defensive side of the ball, and this is really the story of the team now. So starting things off, we'll look at the defensive line and see what I meant about inflated and weird ratings. How is Cliff Averill the highest rated player on this defense that has Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor? He's a 99 overall. Michael Bennett is a 97. And then you have an okay DT duo in Mebane and Hill. Now your linebacking core is really good with Bobby Wagner, future first ballot Hall of Famer right there, KJ Wright and Bruce Irvin, and then of course, you can't forget the Legion of Boom. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and then a little bit of a drop off at CB2 with Jeremy Lane. Of course, we did lose Byron Maxwell, but he ended up not being all that good for them, so I think that within the next year or so, we can upgrade upon that position and really round this thing out. But I don't think having a decent CB2 is the worst thing in the world. I mean, he's a 77, so I still think we're okay. And now see what I meant about inflated ratings. You can actually go out to free agency and find yourself some decent players. So you have John Asamoah. He is 27 years old, 83 overall. I think if we could get him in here on a one-year deal, that would put us over the roster limit, but we'll do that. So let me release somebody, then we can bring in a new starting right guard. So I did bring in Asamoah. I want to take a quick look at our cap space. We have around $8.77 million. I do want to see if we can possibly find an even better right tackle than the one that we have right now. So Bailey is a 73 overall, and David Stewart is a 79 overall. So despite the age, I am going to bring in the aging veteran here. And honestly, I don't know why more teams don't do this in the preseason. There are always these really solid veterans out there that end up getting signed to cheap one-year deals, a couple million. My Indianapolis Colts, that is my team, are someone that I always get frustrated with. I see players will sign, for example, I was going to say Rock Ya-Sin. I feel like Rock Ya-Sin signed for a pretty cheap deal. He's someone that I would have liked to have had back on the Colts. It's just, you see these guys out there, they're just sitting, they're waiting, you know they're talented, just bring them in, give them a shot. I mean, you got to spend the money regardless, right? So obviously, I'm not a cap expert by any means. I'm not an NFL GM. It's a video game. But in terms of the video game world, we have upgraded this offensive line significantly. I mean, the 2015 Seahawks, these are 4 new starters compared to what you had in real life. So in theory, we should have an upgrade there. And definitely interesting to see some of the players on the trade block. I mean, look at this. Shaq Barrett, one of the best pass rushers of the last 5-10 years. He doesn't even have a picture in here. Micah Hyde's on the trade block. There's AJ McCarron. Who remembers him? And his near win in the playoffs as a Cincinnati Bengal until Vontaze Burfict happened. Crazy game that was. In fact, that might have actually been this season or the season before. But we're just going to kind of work our way through the preseason here, and then we will go through each and every regular season game. What we're going to do is, I feel that since this is a Dynasty do-over, these are games that were played in real life. I'm going to show you guys a comparison, how the games went in real life, a brief breakdown of the stats, anything interesting that happened, and then we will actually simulate the game and see how our results compare. So we're 0-1, but it is just the preseason. Alright, and at long last, the regular season is here. We have to travel on the road to face off against the St. Louis Rams. Let's see how that game played out in real life. And in case you don't remember, those Seahawks teams of the 2010s, they were amazing, but there is one team that just always gave them trouble, and it was Jeff Fisher's St. Louis Rams. So week 1 was a 34-31 overtime loss on the road. Russell Wilson played an okay game, not amazing by any means. Nick Foles was efficient for the Rams. Who remembers that? And also, who remembers Benny Cunningham? Jared Cook, the ageless wonder, putting up 85 yards. All in all, not too amazing offensive stats for either team considering the final score, but it was a loss. Now let's see if we can outdo that here in our Dynasty do-over. And we not only get the win, but we make a huge statement, an exclamation point in week 1 on the road as we beat the Rams 44-3, bro. Let's take a look at the stats. 495 yards of total offense. Russell Wilson, passer rating of 127. Nick Foles, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. How many sacks we get on him? 3. In the run game, Beast Mode, 102 yards. Thomas Rawls scored. Gurley, we held him to 3.6 a carry. Russell Wilson punches it in on the ground. Doug Baldwin scores twice. Tyler Lockett finds the end zone. Defensively, leading tackler Jameel McClain with 14 and TJ McDonald with 10. Let's look at the sacks here. We got 1.5 from Jordan Hill. Aaron Donald did get 1. Frank Clark, the rookie, gets 1. Okay. And KJ Wright gets in there for half a sack. Meanwhile, there's Jameel McClain. Big game for him, but Cam Chancellor and Harold Simon picking up interceptions for the Seahawks. And what a start in week 1. We love to see it. So week 2, we travel on the road again to the Green Bay Packers. A lot of history between these two teams in the 2010s. This was a 27-17 L for Seattle. Dropped them to 0-2 on the year. Russell Wilson was the leading rusher today with 78 yards. Doug Baldwin did score. And Randall Cobb had a big game against the LOB. 8 catches for 116 yards. Clean game for Aaron Rodgers. And James Starks was the leading rusher. So let's see if instead of 0-2, we can get ourselves to 2-0. And wow, unfortunately, for as great as we were in week 1, we were equally terrible in week 2 as the Packers dropped 48 points on us. Are you serious? We gained 173 yards of total offense. Aaron Rodgers was perfect. Russell Wilson had a passer rating of 27. Oh my goodness. Eddie Lacy has 95 yards. Not surprised to see Aaron Rodgers, James Starks going off on us. Randall Cobb, just like real life, had a good game. Jordy Nelson scored twice. What a mess for this Seahawks team, man. What is going on? Michael Bennett does get a sack. I don't think we had any interceptions, no. But Clinton Dix and Casey Hayward did for the Packers. And man, we got to get back on track. That is ugly. So next up, we've got the Chicago Bears, who in real life, unfortunately for them, had to start Jimmy Clausen. And when you're playing Jimmy Clausen against the Legion of Boom, it's no surprise that you get shut out 26-0. Matt Forte was a dog as a Chicago Bear, always fun to watch, had him on my fantasy team. And Thomas Rawls topped 100 yards this game. Meanwhile, Jimmy Graham, the future Chicago Bear, would score his first touchdown as a Seahawk in this game. Okay, so we get back on track in a major way. This is what a crazy start to the season. You put up 44 points, you lose allowing 48 points, and then you blow out the next team 41-7. This is about as Jekyll and Hyde as it gets. Now Russell Wilson gets back on track this game. Jay Cutler gets the start, but he doesn't fare too well, throwing 2 interceptions. I do want to see how many times we sacked him. 4. Yeah, he was having a rough day. Beast Mode scores. Looks like Russell Wilson finds the end zone on the ground again. Lockett scores, I believe his second touchdown of the season. Doug Baldwin scores. Charles Clay, the free agent addition, with 6 catches for 44 yards, making a contribution. Jermaine Kearse scores, and so does Kevin White, the rookie that could have been. Now defensively, Shea McClellan is the leading tackler of this game. Sacks, we get 2.5 from Cliff Averill, 1 from Jordan Hill. Bobby Wagner gets in on half a sack. He also gets an interception, and Richard Sherman hauls in an interception as well. I believe that's his first of the season. Next, we get a matchup with the Detroit Lions. This was a low-scoring affair, a 13-10 win that got Seattle to 500 in real life. Stafford had 230 yards. Wilson had a clean game. Amir Abdullah did absolutely nothing, and the Legion of Boom held Calvin Johnson in check. Now, if I recall correctly, this was a game where I believe it was something like a controversial fumble touchdown scenario at the goal line towards the end of the game. Let me know in the comments if you're a Lions or Seahawks fan and remember this game, but I do vaguely remember something like this. Jermaine Kearse made a couple big plays, 2 catches for 84 yards, but let's see if we can get the win here. And when I said Jekyll and Hyde, I couldn't have been closer to the truth. We lose 31-6. What is going on with this team, man? We're either blowing out or getting blown out. Russell Wilson can't figure out what kind of quarterback he wants to be. It's like one week he's Seahawks Russell Wilson, the next week he's Broncos Russell Wilson. So Seahawks country is not having a good time. Theo Riddick, leading rusher of the game. Joique Bell does score. So many blasts from the past here. Charles Clay, 6 catches for all of 22 yards. Pathetic. Mike Williams, the other Mike Williams, not the one you're probably thinking of, scores twice. Defensively, Bobby Wagner has 16 tackles. Oh my goodness. KJ Wright gets a sack. Michael Bennett gets a sack. Jordan Hill gets a sack. Brandon Meebane and Richard Sherman share one. And Earl Thomas brings in an interception. So, can we find some consistency, please? That would be amazing. I'd love to see it. So definitely not the easiest matchup here. We get a Week 5 matchup at Cincinnati. This was a 27-24 overtime loss. As you can see, the Seahawks had a pretty commanding lead, but Cincinnati scored 17 fourth quarter points. Andy Dalton did everything that he could. I mean, pretty solid day considering the team he went up against. Thomas Rawls did go off, 169 yards and a score. Tyler Eifert, the guy who I was just talking crap about earlier, put up 90 yards and 2 scores on the Legion of Boom. So hopefully we can get ourselves over 500, otherwise we will be sitting at the exact same record this team had in real life. Alright, so it wasn't a blowout, but it was still an L. However, 46-42, that is an exciting final score right there. Some fireworks, both teams over 550 yards of offense. Andy Dalton, oh my goodness, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Russell Wilson, still a very good game. Andy Dalton threw an 85-yard touchdown at one point. Russell Wilson did not get sacked. Gio Bernard did score. Marshawn scored twice. Derek Coleman scored, and so did Andy Dalton on the ground. Wow, MVP level performance from Andy Dalton there. Baldwin scored, Marvin Jones over 100 yards, so is AJ Green. Charles Clay 5 for 103. Mohamed Sanu scored, Eifert scored, Gio Bernard scored twice through the air. This game was crazy. Bobby Wagner, 13 tackles. I know we got a couple sacks. Brandon Mebane, Bruce Irvin, Atiyah Rubin, and Reggie Nelson picked off Russell Wilson. Wow, what a game that was. So just like in real life, we are 2-3 heading into this matchup with the Carolina Panthers, and also just like real life, they are 4-0 heading into today's game. And this game gets 2 slides because this picture is sick. 2015, the Carolina Panthers were looking to break out, and who better to do it against than Russell Wilson, the Legion of Boom, and this incredible Seattle Seahawks team. This picture is ice cold. And the reason for that is the Carolina Panthers came in and they won this game in the most hostile environment of 2015. They won 27-23. It was a very close game, and it did push our Seattle Seahawks down to 2-4. Greg Olsen, I believe it was, scored the game winner as he had 7 catches for 131 yards and a score. Jimmy Graham, though, put up a great tight end battle with him, racking up 140 yards of his own, and Jonathan Stewart scored twice for the Panthers. So this was a great game. Hopefully we can pull out the victory here, though. Would be huge for us heading into next week. And just like real life, we are going to lose a very close battle. It's going to push us to 2-4 on the year, just like real life. And despite the close score, I mean, they outgained us in total yardage by almost 150. Wilson, no touchdowns. Newton, not a clean game, but he did what he needed to. Stewart had a big game on the ground, 120 yards. Cameron Artis-Payne scored. Wilson did get a rushing score. So did Cam Newton for good measure. Not a lot going on in the receiving game. CAP did score through the air as well as on the ground. Bobby Wagner, again, is your leading tackler. Let's look at the sacks. 2 for Jared Allen. I forgot he was a Carolina Panther at one point. 1 for Michael Bennett. 1 for Brandon Mebane. And let's see, anyone else for Seattle? It's not looking like it. Richard Sherman did get 2 interceptions, just wasn't quite enough. So just like real life, we're at a bit of a crossroads here. We really got to start racking up those wins. Thankfully, we do get a bad San Francisco 49ers team. And this was a good game to get back on track for Seattle as they went on the road and beat San Francisco easily 20-3. Colin Kaepernick struggled. Marshawn Lynch had a big game. Tyler Lockett scored. And Vernon Davis is just getting too old at this point. So hopefully history can repeat itself. We got to get a win here. And it wasn't easy, but we do get the much-needed victory to get ourselves back to 3-4. 27-24 is your final. It was a close matchup here. Wow, both quarterbacks almost identical passer ratings. Well, I actually misread that a little bit. A little bit of dyslexia on my part there, but still very close numbers, actually. In almost every category, the yardage, even the longest pass. Let's look at the sacks. Kaepernick did get sacked 4 times. Wilson was kept clean. Beast Mode did score. Kaepernick had a big game rushing. Thomas Rawls found the end zone, and so did Carlos Hyde. So did Jared Hayne, the rookie who I've never heard of. Anquan Bolden, big game, 135 yards. Torrey Smith scored. Marshawn did get a rare receiving score. Now let's look at the sacks. Cam Chancellor is the leading tackler. 1.5 for Averill, half a sack for Chancellor. A bunch of guys getting half a sack here. Interceptions, none from this game, but we do get the victory, and that is great for us. So next we get the Dallas Cowboys. We have to go on the road. They've got a 4-2 record, so definitely a solid team. And it might be a little bit tougher in Madden than it was in real life, as the Cowboys had to start Matt Castle this game, and Darren McFadden was their leading rusher and leading receiver. This was an ugly year for the Cowboys. I believe this is what earned them the number 4 overall pick, where they got Zeke Elliott, took Dak Prescott in the 4th, and then have been pretty successful from that point on if you don't count the month of January. So hopefully we can get the win here. Hopefully we can make it a little prettier than this 13-12 final score and get ourselves back to 500. And would you look at that, guys, we tied the Dallas Cowboys 24-24. We put up 500 yards of total offense. Romo has a clean game. Wilson has a fine game, I guess. We do sack Romo 6 times, so our pass rush is pretty healthy right now. Lynch over 100 yards. Thomas Rawls finds the end zone. Romo gets a rushing score. Look at him with the wheels. Cole Beasley, 99 yards and a score. Lance Dunbar also finds the end zone. Bobby Wagner has 20 tackles this game. Oh my goodness. Greg Hardy with 2 sacks. Everyone's favorite Walmart employee. Shout out Greg Hardy. Let's see. A few guys coming up with sacks. And forgive me what I said about Greg Hardy. No disrespect to Greg Hardy. Just saw that recently. No shade. Greg Hardy, great player, great UFC fighter in his own right. And we're moving on with a tie. And so at the bye week, we are 3-4-1, which thankfully is somehow good enough to top the NFC West for now, although we are about to get a big matchup here with the Arizona Cardinals, who were very good in 2015, actually won the division, and I believe they are second right now, so they are going to come into this matchup with a record that we will see here in just a second of 3-5, so this game is a big one for us. And hopefully history doesn't repeat itself, because this was an L in real life. 39-32, it was a shootout. We've seen a couple of those already, and it was a bit of a furious comeback attempt by Seattle. As you can see here, they were trailing 22-7 at the half. Just couldn't quite get it done in the 4th quarter. Russell Wilson did not have quite the level of game that Carson Palmer had, as he had 363 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Great year for him. Andre Ellington was the leading rusher for the Cardinals, and Larry Fitzgerald, the ageless wonder, 10 catches for 130 yards. Let's see if we can get the win, though. And we do get the victory. Just like real life, a pretty high-scoring, close game in the end. And we were actually the ones, we came back again. We were down 24-9 at halftime. We had a good 3rd quarter, and that was just enough to get it done. 602 yards of total offense. Russell Wilson, 418 passing yards. He does get sacked 5 times. We do bring down Carson Palmer 4 times. Marshawn Lynch does put up 92 yards. David Johnson is a rookie, crazy to think about here. Lockett, 131 yards. Speaking of rookies, Baldwin scores, Curse scores, Michael Floyd scores for the Cardinals. Let's look at the defense. Sacks. A lot of guys getting sacks here. Have not seen Frank Clark's name in a minute, so that is a bit disappointing. And the Honey Badger does get an interception for the Cardinals, and we are moving on now with a record of 4-4-1, where we now get to face off against the San Francisco 49ers again. And it was just not a good year to be the San Francisco 49ers, as they fell 29-13 to our Seattle Seahawks. This got the Seahawks back up to 5-5, another 500 record here, as Blaine Gabbert actually had a decent game statistically. It just doesn't show in the final score. Russell Wilson had a very nice game. Thomas Rawls an even better one with 209 yards rushing and a score. And Anquan Bolden put up 93 yards for the Niners. So let's see if we can get the job done here. And just like real life, we decide to beat up on the lowly San Francisco 49ers. Who was their coach in 2015? Let me know in the comments. I'll shout you out in the next video. I want to say it was either Chip Kelly or Jim Tomsula. I don't even know how I remember Jim Tomsula. They had a very rough stretch before Kyle Shanahan was brought in. They've been pretty great overall since then, but Russell Wilson had an almost perfect game. Kaepernick struggled. We did sack him 3 times, and Russell Wilson has been getting good protection. Multiple games now I've seen where he has not been sacked. Kaepernick over 100 yards rushing and a score. Lynch scores twice. Carlos Hyde scores. Anquan Bolden scores. Charles Clay does score. He's been kind of quiet for us. I don't love that. Lynch does score, and so does Thomas Rawls. Very nice offensive production. KJ Wright is our leading tackler. Let's look at the sacks. 2 for Michael Bennett. KJ Wright and Jordan Hill get in there. And Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, 2 LOB stalwarts, both getting interceptions on Kaepernick. So we've gotten ourselves back up to a winning record. We're looking good here. And next up, we get a big one. The Pittsburgh Steelers with a 7-3 record are coming to town. And for as long as it's been, I do actually vaguely remember this game. It was a pretty exciting one, 39-30. It was a W for Seattle. Ben Roethlisberger had 456 passing yards. Looks like Le'Veon Bell was not available this game, and Marcus Wheaton, of all people, put up 201 yards on this defense. Doug Baldwin scored 3 times. Russell Wilson had 5 passing touchdowns. This was a crazy game. Hopefully it results in a victory for us once again. And man, very close to real life results. It's a 35-31 victory. That is eerily close. Now let's look at the stats. I've got a feeling Marcus Wheaton's not going to be putting up those same numbers. Ben Roethlisberger certainly did it. I don't know how they scored the points that they did. It had to be a healthy Lev Bell. We sack him 6 times. Russell Wilson does get sacked twice. And yep, there's Le'Veon Bell, 145 yards and 2 scores. He was incredible for like at least a solid 3-4 year stretch. Let me know in the comments which Dynasty do-over you guys want to see next, because I'm definitely thinking the Killer Bees could be a good one. Killer Bees with Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Ben Roethlisberger. Marshawn Lynch had a big game. DeAngelo Williams did score. Rawls scored twice. Jordan Todman scored. Former Indianapolis Colts. I don't know how I remember that. Curse, 109 and a score. Lockett, 100 and a score. AB, 5 for 75. Charles Clay is just not doing much for us. I think that might have been a not great decision on my part, but it's okay. Better than trading a first for Jimmy Graham, I guess. 15 tackles for Bobby Wagner. Let's look at the sacks. Bennett, Averill, Wagner, Wright, the usual suspects. Demarcus Dobbs does get in there for 1. Richard Sherman with 2 interceptions. He's got quite a few, I feel, this season. This secondary is playing very well. And next we get a matchup with the 7-4 Minnesota Vikings. So another team with a good record here. Real life, we would see this team again in the playoffs. It's possible we do here in Madden. But unlike that playoff game that we talked about at the beginning of the video, this was a blowout, 38-7, as we go on the road and just trounce the Minnesota Vikings. Teddy Bridgewater only 118 yards passing. Adrian Peterson 18 yards on the ground. Disgusting. Doug Baldwin scores twice. Rawls over 100 yards, and Wilson a very clean game. Let's hope for more of the same here. And as much as I'd like to see maybe a little bit more out of my defense, I am happy with the 48-35 victory. Actually, I might have misread that. I don't know why I read that as being a 1-score win. But, I mean, 35 points is still not great. Russell Wilson, another beautiful day. Teddy Bridgewater, a pretty good game as well. Both players getting sacked 3 times. Peterson, more efficiency this game. He does find 92 yards and a score. Matt Asiata scores. Who remembers him? Thomas Rawls, Russell Wilson, both racking up rushing scores. And Russell Wilson's had himself a year. Mike Wallace scores. Charles Clay, finally, I say what I say about him last week, and he scores 3 times for us. Very nice. Jairus Wright and Tyler Lockett both score. Lockett having a very nice rookie year, and Matt Asiata finds the end zone again. Bobby Wagner, leading tackler, no surprise there. A couple players getting in there for sacks. Richard Sherman does get half a sack, and he also gets an interception. So very nice season that we're getting out of Richard Sherman. So we're sitting now with a 7-4-1 record, pretty firmly atop the NFC West. We just can't mess up these last few weeks, but I think we're safe. We are going to have to travel to Baltimore here, prime time, taking on the 6-6 Ravens. And let's hope for more of the same here, as poor Jimmy Clausen doesn't even play in the NFC West, but has to somehow face us twice this year, once as a Bear and again as a Raven, and both games go about equally as well for him, as Russell Wilson is really heating up. 5 touchdowns, Lockett scores twice, and Kamar Aiken is the leading receiver for Baltimore. This gets us to 8-5 in real life. We had control pretty much the whole game, so let's hope that we can keep that going. And it is exactly what we hoped for. This team is heating up at the right time. Since the bye week, we have scored no less than 30 points in a single game. We get another blowout win here over the Baltimore Ravens, and it's Joe Flacco this time who just can't get anything going. Russell Wilson is perfect in this game. We sacked Flacco 3 times. Another game where Russell Wilson is not getting sacked. Marshawn Lynch scores, Justin Forsett scores, and so does Thomas Rawls. Baldwin finds the end zone 3 times. Lockett has yet another score. Wow, what a great season for these guys. Sharice Wright is the leading tackler from today's game. Michael Bennett, 2 sacks. Let's look at the interceptions. None from this game, but that doesn't matter. We got the victory. That's what our concern was, so we're moving on. And next up on our list are the Cleveland Browns. They're coming in with a 5-8 record. And say what you want about Johnny Manziel, but the guy did go on the road to Seattle and did throw 1 passing touchdown against the Legion of Boom. Of course, he did get blown out 30-13 as this game got the Seahawks to 9-5 on the season. Jermaine Kearse had a big game, and Duke Johnson, when that's your primary weapon, things aren't going to go so well for you. So in the year before the unfortunate 0-16 season, the Cleveland Browns are looking to get a win. Hopefully they do not. And man, history sure is repeating itself here, just in a much better way as we get the 42-7 victory. Johnny Manziel cannot say that he threw a touchdown in video game world. Russell Wilson perfect again. Each player getting sacked once. Beast mode scores. Rawls scores twice. Manziel does get a rushing score to his credit. Let me know if you want a Johnny Manziel rebuild. I think that'd be fun, even though he only appears in like 2 Maddens, if that. Baldwin over 100 yards and a score. Lynch with a receiving score. Marshawn Lynch, when he's been healthy this year, has been great. Dansby, 15 tackles for the Browns, 12 for Dante Whitner. So they were getting the tackles. And KJ Wright gets a sack, and he also gets an interception. So good game there for KJ Wright. And now at this point, how we locked up the NFC West? Yeah, we have. So we have clinched the NFC West. We have at least a home playoff game. Let's see if the 1 seed is still in play for us, or actually the 2 seed, because that's the way the playoffs still work at this point. It very well could be. It's going to be neck and neck with us and a few other teams. I can't remember if we actually beat the Lions or not. The Cowboys, of course, we tied with. But it's looking like the Panthers, just like real life, are destined for that 1 seed. Meanwhile, we have got the 4-10 Rams. And remember what I said in week 1 about the St. Louis Rams having the Seahawks number. No matter how good the Seahawks were, they snapped the winning streak here, sending the Seahawks to 9-6. It's a 23-17 L. Case Keenum's the quarterback, doesn't have an amazing game, but it doesn't matter. Todd Gurley has a good game. Baldwin over 100 yards and a score, and Wilson a pretty solid game. I don't know exactly how Seattle lost this. It looks like they were down 16-3 at the half and just couldn't quite complete the comeback. But let's see if we can overcome our St. Louis Demons here. And man, does history have a weird way of repeating itself in this game or what? As we fall to the Rams, the bad Rams, 30-20. Nick Foles has a clean game. Russell Wilson does too, just not a lot going on. We sack him 6 times and we still lose by 10 points. Gurley has a big game. Russell Wilson finds the end zone. What was the box score? I don't get it. So yeah, they were up 17-7 at half and we just couldn't quite get it done in the second half. So man, some of these results are just eerily similar to real life. Who had 6 sacks, though? Averill, KJ Wright, Bobby Wagner, Michael Bennett, Jordan Hill. Yeah, I mean, pass rush was busy today. No interceptions, though, so did that cost us a potential bye? It very well could have, as we fall to 9-5-1. So we are on bye watch right now. And let's look at the NFC. So where are we at? Okay. Yeah, it's not looking great for us to get that bye. I suppose if the Lions lose, we would technically be ahead of them. And if the Cowboys lose, we would then have the same record. So it could come down to a tiebreaker. But that's a decent amount of help that we're going to need. Regardless, we know that we're a playoff team as we face off with the 7-8 Arizona Cardinals. And we gotta hope for more of the same in this matchup as we beat them 36-6 in real life. Wilson threw 3 touchdown passes, Carson Palmer struggled, and Christine Michael was over 100 yards rushing. And we do get a pretty easy victory, 27-10. This will end our season with a 10-5-1 record, making us that much better than the real-life Seattle Seahawks, who went 10-6. So we got them by a tie. I mean, that's about as close as it gets. And really weird because a lot of these games went exactly the same in terms of not final score, but just the result. Some of them did have pretty similar final scores, though. We do sack Carson Palmer 4 times. We'll look at the regular season stats here in a moment. Lynch over 100 yards. Wilson finds the end zone. David Johnson scores. Larry Fitz 93 yards. Tyler Lockett scores again. He's got to be over 10 touchdowns as a rookie. Wagner with 13 tackles, and he hauls in a sack. Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, and Brandon Mebane getting in there, and no interceptions for us. But we get the victory, and we are a playoff team, and that's all that matters. And there are your final NFC West standings. Notice Phillip Rivers wins MVP. Good for him. So we win the NFC West. It wasn't a great division. The Cardinals and the Rams were mid. The 49ers were terrible. And here are your regular season stats. So offense, 4th best in the league, and defense are 12th. So bit of a step down from real life there. Let's look at the player stats. So Wilson, 32 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 4,200 yards, passer rating of 104. Very nice. Lynch, 1,400 yards and 10 scores. Wilson adds 590 and 6 on the ground. I mean, Wilson had himself a very nice season. Borderline MVP numbers, just a very good year. Thomas Rawls scored 10 times. Unfortunately, we could not get Jay Ajayi involved. I guess we'll call this a redshirt year for him. We'll try and get him the ball a little bit more next year. Let's look at the receiving yardage, though. Doug Baldwin, the leader, with 1,100 yards and 12 scores. Curse, 1,104. Lockett, 895 and 8 for a rookie. Very nice numbers. 588 and 4 for Charles Clay. All right. Lynch scores 3 times through the air. Let's look at the defense, and actually let's look at the sacks allowed. So 13 by Russell Okung, 5 by Stewart, 4 by Marpet. Okay. Bobby Wagner, 173 tackles. That is crazy. Let's look at the sacks. 14 by Bennett, 9.5 by Averill, 8 by Jordan Hill. Interceptions, 6 by Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas, each hauling in 2 of their own. And let's just look at the yearly awards here briefly. So Russell Wilson came in 3rd for MVP voting. Pete Carroll is not going to make the list for Coach of the Year. Yeah, I mean, you should be winning with the team that you have. Russell Wilson 2nd in Offensive Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, Bobby Wagner is going to come in 3rd. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Thomas Rawls comes in 4th. Lockett coming in at 6th. Defensive Rookie of the Year, that's crazy. Quan Alexander's a rookie. No votes there. Best quarterback, Wilson coming in at 4. Running back, Lynch at 3. Receiver, you've got Baldwin at 5. Best O-line, you got the Cowboys and the Panthers pretty much dominating that list. Best D-line, Michael Bennett getting some votes. Best linebacker, where's Bobby Wagner? All the way down there. That's crazy. Richard Sherman does win Best DB for what that's worth. And Best Kicker, we're not going to have anyone. That's fine. And now it's time for the playoffs, so this is going to be very interesting. And it's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming in with a 10-6 record. Let's take a quick look at their team just for fun. So here's your 2015 Eagles roster. You've got Fletcher Cox, Malcolm Jenkins, Zach Ertz, Lane Johnson, Jason Peters, Vinnie Curry, DeMarco Murray, Brent Selleck, Stanley Havili, Ryan Matthews, Michael Kendricks, Jordan Matthews, who remembers him? Who's the quarterback? Sam Bradford, Mark Sanchez, and Thad Lewis. Okay. You gotta think easy victory here, right? You would certainly hope so. Both teams coming in with nearly identical records. Fingers crossed that we can get ourselves to the divisional round just like we did in real life. And we do get the victory. 42-20, it's a fairly easy one in the wild card round. Here are your other wild card matchups. The Chiefs are going to beat the Texans, the Vikings are going to beat the Lions, and the Broncos are going to shut out the Baltimore Ravens. So let's look at our playoff matchup here, where we routed the Eagles. Wilson had a clean game, Bradford not so much. sacked him twice. We get sacked once. Lynch does score with 97 yards. Wilson finds the end zone. Receiving, Baldwin scores, Riley Cooper scores, yuck. Tyler Lockett scores, Charles Clay scores, and so does Zach Ertz. Couple tight ends getting in there. Michael Kendricks, the leading tackler before the insider trading, of course. Brandon Mebane, Jordan Hill, and Taylor Hart getting sacks, whoever Taylor Hart is. Forgive me for not remembering him. Walter Thurman, I believe, was a Seahawk, and he gets an interception. So does Jeremy Lane. And we are on to the divisional round where we are going to be facing off with the Dallas Cowboys, who we tied earlier in the season, coming in with nearly identical records, so a great matchup there. And then also you've got the Chiefs and the Chargers, the Vikings and the Panthers, and Broncos Patriots. Always a classic matchup, Manning versus Brady. So you've got some really good ones here, divisional round weekend. But the 10-5-1 Seahawks against the 11-4-1 Cowboys. That is a great matchup there. Can we do a little bit better than real life and get ourselves to the conference championship game? So here are your divisional round results, and unlike earlier in the season, you can't tie in the playoffs, and the Seahawks certainly knew that as they beat the Cowboys by 2 scores. Wow, we'll get to that in a second. Chiefs are moving on to the conference championship game. We will face off with the Vikings, who upset and destroy the Panthers, so we will get a rematch with them. And the Broncos are going to destroy the New England Patriots. So wow, very interesting results there. We actually are close in total yardage. Wilson has a clean game. Romo gets picked off 3 times. That's unfortunate. Poor playoff Romo. Sacked 3 times. Guy never had success in the playoffs, unfortunately. Love him as a player. Rawls scores. Lance Dunbar scores. Russell Wilson, 2 rushing scores. Great game for him. Terrence Williams. Who remembers Terrence Williams? 167 yards and 2 scores. Very nice. Baldwin finds the end zone. Defensively, Rolando McClain is the leading tackler. Jordan Hill, Michael Bennett, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Sean Lee all getting sacks. Harold Simon, did I mention him last week? He is a Seahawk. I'm so dumb. I called him an Eagle. He's not an Eagle. Richard Sherman and Bruce Irvin, both performing well in the playoffs, and we are on to the conference championship game, ladies and gentlemen, where we are going to be facing off with the Minnesota Vikings. So, wow. History has repeated itself, just in slightly different circumstances. Not the wild card round, not on the road. It's the conference championship game at home against the 9-7 Minnesota Vikings. This is for all the marbles, almost all the marbles. This is to get to the Super Bowl, where we will face off against either the Broncos or the Chiefs. Can we do it? And oh my goodness, we lose an absolute heartbreaker. 41-38 is your final score. The conference championship game on the other side was a banger as well. And man, 600 yards of total offense, and we can't get the job done. Oh man. And it went to overtime too, bro. Are you kidding me? Wow. So, I mean, this game was just back and forth start to finish. It was 24-21 at half. Both teams had nearly even second halves. The Seahawks just did enough to force it to overtime, but the Vikings come out on top. Wow. Wilson, 3 interceptions. Bridgewater throws 2. Ugly game. Bridgewater does get sacked 5 times. Peterson, an amazing performance. Maybe he gets himself a ring here. Wilson scores, Asiata scores, Rawls scores, and so does Bridgewater. This would have been an all-time playoff game. Baldwin, 10 catches for 124 yards. Lockett, 106 and a score. Rawls scores twice. Rudolph scores twice. Charles Johnson scores. Former late-round fantasy flyer right there, Charles Johnson. 14 tackles for Cam Chancellor. KJ Wright, Brandon Mebane, Frank Clark, there he is, getting a sack. Interceptions, though, Jerron Harmon, Chad Greenway, Earl Thomas, Jeremy Lane, and Anton Exum Jr. I've never heard of him, I'm not going to lie to you. But man, that's going to do it. And it's going to be Vikings-Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So I guess we'll see who comes out on top there, just for that sake. And so, moment of truth here in Super Bowl 50, it is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs coming out on top. They destroy the Minnesota Vikings, which is unfortunate because had it been us, I don't think it would have been the same result. Man, how did that happen though? Bridgewater got sacked 5 times. Jamal Charles had a pretty big game. So did Sharkandrick West. Yeah, I just don't really see it. I mean, for that big of a blowout, that's crazy. All right. I suppose we'll take it. And we are going to head into the offseason as conference runners-up. And now here is a list of our pending free agents. You'll have to stay tuned to part 2 to see who we bring back, but Bruce Irvin, real life, did end up leaving for the Raiders. Do we change that? John Asamoah, is he more than just a one-year Band-Aid? Coleman, do we bring back the fullback? Do we re-sign Russell Okung, not let him leave for Denver? Do we bring back Brandon Mebane, Jermaine Kearse, Jeremy Lane, Christine Michael? A lot of decisions to make here. So part 2 is when we will make these decisions on some of these guys. We'll talk about who the Seahawks brought back in real life, who they let walk, and how our decisions differ. But all in all, it was a successful year for us. Ali Marpet in particular has developed already into one of the best guards in the NFL. Max Unger, glad to still have him around. And defensively, the LOB is still very much the LOB. We'd like to upgrade on CB2, not get ourselves into so many shootouts, maybe get ourselves some DTs. And offensively, perhaps we could even upgrade at receiver a little bit, especially if we're going to lose Jermaine Kearse. Jay Ajayi for a 4th-round pick, he didn't get to see the field, and I mean, that wasn't much of an investment. It was really more so a shot in the dark, so we'll see about that. The right side of the line we could always look into improving upon because these guys were really just seen as Band-Aids, but those are all moves for part 2, where we will be hopping into Madden 17 for the 2016 season. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Always love hearing them, and I will see you in the next video.